Okay, maybe we'll go ahead and get started as people are trickling in. So, hi everyone, I'm Dr. Jenny Makovkina. I'm one of the co-directors of Weill Cornell's SAFE program, along with Dr. Nicholas Romano. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. We want to welcome you to our second webinar this academic year. And before we move forward to Dr. Gold's highly anticipated presentation on Screen Smart Parenting, I'd like to just briefly introduce the SAFE program. Our program seeks to help individuals and families affected by addiction navigate the challenging world of substance use disorders and behavioral addictions through community education and peer support. We host monthly webinars, such as the one tonight, to provide reliable education, and we're hoping to grow our network of peers for family members looking for guidance and support as their loved ones struggle with addiction. We hope that you'll reach out to us through our website if you're a family member looking for support, or if you want to use your own experience to help support others. This is our team. So along with Dr. Romano and myself, the program is overseen by Dr. John Avery. And we have a wonderful team of addiction psychiatrists in training, Doctors Natai, Woods, and Seman. We have Sahil Anand, who's our medical student coordinator. We invite you to connect with us through our website, where there's an online form to reach out to us, and also where we will post recordings of past webinars. And we hope you'll join us for the next SAFE webinar on November 17th, when Dr. Beverly Shin will present on cannabis use disorder. And with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Romano to introduce Dr. Gold.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So, welcome. Dr. Jodi Gold is a board-certified adult and pediatric psychiatrist who completed her adult psychiatric residency and fellowship trainings in child and adolescent psychiatry at Weill Cornell, while also having completed a fellowship in infant psychiatry. She's the director of the Gold Center and formerly led the child and adolescent psychiatry outpatient department at Weill Cornell Medicine. Dr. Gold has also spoken nationally and internationally to physicians, educators, and parents about her developmental approach to managing digital technology in children and adolescents, which led to the publication of her book, Screen Smart Parenting: How to Find a Balance and Benefit in Your Child's Use of Social Media, Apps, and Digital Devices in 2014. We're thrilled and grateful to have you here with us today, Dr. Gold. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Okay, I'm going to share. Here we go. Share. You. Okay, can everyone see it?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you so much for having me. So I am a Jodi Gold, and I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist. And as Nick said, I have been working in the field of sort of managing digital technology for now 15 years. And today my goal is to sort of take you through the process of raising your kids online. And I'm going to try to be as evidence-based as possible, give you a lot of hands-on suggestions, tell you a little bit about my observations. I think you'll probably agree with some things, not agree with others, but I'm hoping that it's going to spark some debate. So the goal of my talk for today is I want to address how to raise children online, and I really am focusing on thinking about how you raise your kids offline, because every parent out there and every clinician out there understands their value system offline. So what I'm trying to get you to do tonight is to think about how to use those parenting skills and those values to raise your kids online. I want to think about parenting style and digital anxiety, parental digital anxiety. And we're going to do a little bit of overviewing the research and trends, the things that I think are sort of like the highlights, and talk a little bit about addiction, and help make a plan. So, not much we're going to cover, but let's get started. So, your children will spend more time on their devices than sleeping, eating, going to school, or spending time with family or friends. Whether or not we like that or not, that's pretty much true. So that's why it's so important that you're here with us tonight and actually thinking. That's why it's so critical that we think about how we're raising our kids with the devices. Sorry. Okay, so these are the way I've broken it down in terms of thinking about how to become screen smart. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to hone in on your parenting style and your family culture. The second thing we're going to do is try to understand the digital landscape, just a little bit of it, but enough so that you feel comfortable as a parent. And the third thing that we're going to do is try to make a plan and help you think about what you need for a plan. So so this generation of parents today, we are the last generation of digital immigrants. And yes, this is changing, but anybody that was born in anyone that was born in the 20th century, in my opinion, is a digital immigrant. And what that means is that you were raised without the same technology that your children were raised on. Kids that are born, in the last 10, 15 years, it's going to be very different when they become parents because they're going to have had a lot more experience being raised on technology. So the reason I think this is so important is that I think this is where all the friction happens because often parents, including myself, will approach this as an immigrant, as someone who's new and feels like we speak digital with an accent. And sometimes we want our kids to be in the brave new world. At the same time, we're holding on to our old school customs. Our children, on the other hand, are totally fluent. They go online and offline. They don't even make that distinction in the same way. They're much less anxious and they're much more fluent. And often what happens is there's a lot of friction between the parents' anxiety and the kids' excitement about this new world. So I really think it's a helpful framework to think about your role as a parent and thinking about where you're parenting from anxiety and where you feel like you're, not fluent. So that leads me to my next piece, which is thinking about your parenting style and what your relationship is with technology. And I love this I've been using this cartoon for years and years. It never kind of goes out of style. And that's sort of thinking about your relationship to technology. You really can't think about parenting unless you think about your own relationship. And it's not a judgment thing. You may be someone that is online for work, that has always got the newest devices, that's really into technology, or you may be somebody that's still reading the newspaper and doesn't have a TV or doesn't use their computer very much. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's about being self-aware of your own relationship because you can't ask your kids to do things that you're unable to do. So it's critical part of parenting. So, which leads me to, so now that you've kind of figured out your parenting, your relationship with technology. So now you've thought, am I someone that's really into technology? Am I someone that's really afraid of it? The next step you need to do is actually think about your parenting style. And this goes beyond technology. So sociologists divide parenting up into four parts. There's authoritarian, permissive, laissez-faire, and authoritative. Nobody on this webinar tonight is laissez-faire because you wouldn't be bothering to tune in tonight. So that we're not even talking about that. Basically, the difference between permissive and authoritarian is with authoritarian parents, you have a very strict set of values and you're very consistent with the rules and things are pretty top down, but also very consistent. On the flip side, the permissive parents may very much understand each of their child's specific needs in that way, but sometimes the limits and it's sort of very bottom up, and so sometimes the limits are not consistent. So the answer to this riddle here is authoritative parenting. So authoritative parenting combines having a sense of expectations and values and limits with the unique needs of your children. And the reason that authoritative parenting is really important online and offline is that research shows that kids that grow up with authoritative parents are, let's see if I can get this right, they have higher grades, more self-confidence, more self-esteem, lower risks of addiction, less obesity, and lower risk for metabolic abnormalities. So there is a reason for us to think about being authoritative parents, and it's really critical if we're doing it offline to think about an authoritative approach to managing your kids online. Okay, now I'm going to go into a little bit of the statistics, and I don't want to focus on the statistics too much because yes, you can find a statistic to show anything. I'm really just, trying to make a point here. There is some decent studies that show that parents of teens and tweens spend as much as 9 hours with screen media, but that's a range. I'm going to put that anywhere between 3 to 9 hours. What I really care about is that studies, and again, they're variable, show that 78% of those parents believe that they're good role models for their children. And I do think this is critical because I think that we can't even think about our children's online their digital lives online until we think about what our role is and whether we're good role models or not. And I'll be honest, I'm not always a good role model. Again, this is about being aware of when you struggle with technology. I think it's actually critical to share the struggle with your kids. I think it's not always helpful to pretend like this is so easy and there's a strict set of rules and you follow them. You may do that, but if you're like most of us and you have your own struggles with your relationship, it's okay to share that because at this stage, it's a real challenge to manage technology. And so having your kids know that you're struggling with it as well as they are can be helpful because the goal is to be on the same team. I want to talk a little bit in this section about, so I mean, there's a lot of research now. When I started doing this talk in 2012 or 13, there was literally no research. Like there was 3 studies, and now there's some really good research. This is one of the studies that I really like out of Nature, which talks about the research on parenting and problematic screen use. And what it says is that parent screen time when the child is present, not when they're absent, family mealtime screen use, bedtime screen use, and screens to control behavior all can lead to an increase in teen use, which is whatever, but teen problematic use of devices, social media, and gaming. So I want to unpack that for just a moment. The reason there's an asterisk on the parent screen time when child is present is that research actually is more for middle schoolers and early teenagers who are really looking to their parents as role models. So being on your devices a lot in front of your middle schoolers and tweens does impact their relationship with technology without any question. But that research really is solid only for younger teenagers. We know that family mealtime is a time where if you're on your devices during the meals, it is an increased risk factor, and so is bedtime screen use. Bedtime screen use, in my opinion, is much harder to parse out because of the meaning. But what I like at the end of the day, we are trying to get our kids off their devices some of the time. And so, from my take home from all of this, is that there's now really good research to support that one place that we can carve out screen free time is meals, and the other place that we can carve it out is when they're sleeping. So I think those are like two. If you take something home from tonight, it's that you shouldn't have the devices at mealtime, at family meal times, and you should try not to, not sleep with your phone. I used to have all these slides about the phone as the pacifier. I really feel very strongly that your phone should not be the last thing that you touch in the morning or the first thing that you touch, last thing you touch at night or the first thing you touch in the morning. And I always get kids asking me about this. You do not need to use it as an alarm clock. If I could ask the iPhone to disable one thing on their device, I would actually have them disable the alarm, because then people would have to buy alarm clocks that they put in their rooms, and we could get the phones out of the room. So again, there's now really good research. But the thing that I like the most about this particular study for today is that when parents use screens as a behavior, as a reward or a punishment, and I will say that most of us have done that at some time or other, that is also problematic. So parents who are using it to control behavior, meaning they're rewarding the child with the device or they're punishing the child by taking away the device, that actually leads to an increase in screen time and actually, more importantly, in my opinion, an increase in problematic use. So really and truly, that's another take home from today is that device. I know it's so tempting and it feels like it's the only thing we have, but I really I think that the punishment needs to fit the crime when you're parenting around devices. So if your kids are misusing their phones or their iPads, sure, take it away. That's fine. But if they didn't clean up, they didn't make their bed, or they missed curfew, taking away the phone doesn't actually make a lot of sense, if that makes sense. So it's important not to use it as a reward or a punishment. And there's now actually research to support that. Okay. Are you afraid? If you're afraid, your child will smell your fear. We all know this. This is like Parenting 101, and everybody that's at this webinar is way beyond Parenting 101. They smell your fear. And the truth is my hope is that you leave this talk today actually feeling less afraid, not more afraid, because you really can't parent from a place of anxiety. It's nothing. This has nothing to do with the devices or how scared you are of social media or gaming. You actually can't be a parent when when it's all about anxiety. So what we know about anxiety is that anxious parents are more likely to have anxious kids. I always say in general in my practice that anxiety is very contagious. So if you're feeling anxious about all this technology stuff, which I get, if you read the news, it's sometimes hard not to, but you're making your kids more anxious. Our goal is actually to be on the same team with our kids and to actually be on this journey together and not to come from a place of anxiety. So that means that as you're trying to figure out your limits, they have to be intentional and not fear-based. Ultimately, your kids are going to have to navigate this world on their own, and they're going to actually have to have the skills and the experience to help them figure out how to regulate themselves online and offline. So with younger kids, especially, the limits need to make sense. They need to be thoughtful. You need to be able to explain them. Yes, you're the parent, and of course you can have rules, but this is a place where kids can really go behind your back very easily. every kid I have in my practice that's in eighth or ninth grade that isn't allowed to have social media is actually on social media. I mean, I have to keep track to some degree of what my patients are telling their parents or not about social media. So we all know that's true. So that's why the limits have to be intentional and not fear-based. The other pieces is that if you're reading stuff online and following the news, you might be kind of feeling very negative about all of this, which I get, but it's really critical to celebrate the wins. One of the other things that I'm trying to get across, I've been trying to do for the last decade, is actually talk about we all know the negatives. You don't really need me to tell you the negatives. What you might need me to do is to tell you about the positives. But when it comes to parenting, if your kids do something really nice or good or positive online, you have to celebrate it. They get off when you ask them to, you celebrate it. They send a kind text to somebody, you celebrate it. They use it to learn something new, you celebrate it. We have to focus on celebrating the wins, not just being angry and scared. And at the end of the day, this is true for all of parenting and specifically in the online world. That's about keeping the conversations open. As long as your kids are talking to you, I'm really not worried. It's when your kids stop talking to you that I get worried. So you need to parent online in a way that keeps the conversation open, which also means allowing them to some degree to skin their knee online. We're all really good about letting our kids skin their knees offline. We also have to allow it online. Okay, let's try to talk a little bit about the digital landscape. Again, I'm just going to highlight some things that I think are really interesting or worth talking about. Obviously, it's not comprehensive. I want to tell you the four things that I think are most important in terms of understanding the research. The first thing is this research. So when I started doing this in 2012, literally actually up until like almost 2019, really the only research that was good that was out there was truly the Sesame Street research. This concept that Sesame Street in the 1970s was designed to be interesting to parents so that parents would actually watch TV with their children because it cultivates language and social skills, actually to talk to your kids about what was on TV. And that research still holds up 50 years later, is that your kids are more likely to reap the benefits of social media technology in general if you engage with them, if you talk to them. This is much easier to do with young kids and middle schoolers, much harder to do, I know, in high school. But as much as you can be on this journey with them, as much as you can know about their games, ask them about what they're doing on social media, watch TikToks with them, the more likely they are to get the benefit. I also want to talk about, you know this, I'm just throwing it out there again, is that technology used properly offers new avenues for imaginative play. I mean, prior to technology, as soon as you got into fourth or fifth grade, you could no longer dress up as a teacher or dress up as a clown or dress up as Scooby-Doo or whatever, right? Like it was over. It was uncool to have really much imaginative play once you entered into middle school. And now we have a whole world where not just middle schoolers and high schoolers, but adults can actually engage in imaginary play. They can collaborate, they can create. In my opinion, anything creative that's going online for the most part is good. So I just want to remind you, there is lots of research to support all the positive uses of technology. But now I want to talk about the research on social and emotional growth, because that's what I'm trying to focus on more today. And in that case, the easiest way to summarize, in my opinion, the research out there is that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And what I mean by that is that if you are a kid that has high self-confidence, good social skills, isn't struggling with addiction, isn't struggling with anxiety, then the world's your oyster. And so is like social media and the online world, meaning that selective self-presentation, that is the research term for like your profile, like kind of curating your profile, can actually cultivate positive identity development and also just connections and positive validation. The truth is that people that are confident and socially skilled often reap all the benefits online, and there are benefits. Unfortunately, the flip side is also true, which is that the poor get poorer, which you kind of know, but this is important as a parenting point, is that teenagers who seek excessive reassurance online often get negative feedback. And kids that suffer with ADHD or anxiety or addictions are much more at risk of gaining the negative, getting what they would call the hate online, meaning they're more likely to seek out negative excessive reassurance, which gets them negative feedback or hate. They're more likely to get pulled down rabbit holes that we don't want them to get down. They're more likely for it to hurt their self-confidence. And so what that means is we have research to support what we already know. What that means is that you really just at the end of the day need to know your child or your teenager. And if you're concerned about your teenager, then being more vigilant about not just limits, but what they do and how they navigate. We teach our kids a lot about offline world. We teach them how to play sports. We teach them our values. And we also have to do that online, especially if you have a child that you're worried about their impulsivity or their anxiety or their self-confidence. They need more help. And there's a lot of research to support that. Okay. Hold on 1 second. I'm just checking the time. So let's talk a little bit about the social media. Well, what I want to do in terms of the trends around the digital landscape is I want to talk about a little bit about social media, a little bit about understanding AI, and a little bit about digital addictions, just enough to give you sort of what I think are kind of interesting take-home points. So let's talk a little bit about social. So one of the things I get a lot from parents in terms of managing all this is they get overwhelmed. I mean, I get overwhelmed, so I get it. It's very overwhelming to sort of keep up, and people think they need a PhD in computer science or they need to work for Google in order to really like understand what's going on. And that's actually really not true, because when I say that I want you to understand the social, like the digital landscape, I really want you to understand your own children's landscape. So really what I want you to do is talk to your kids about what they want to do online, what they enjoy doing online, what they care about, because we're absolutely not pushing your kids into anything they're not like they have to drag you into it. You're not offering them up social media and gaming that they're not asking for. But you also need to understand their world. So in my office, I often ask people, tell me about your kids' activities and interests. And they can tell me every ballet practice and every soccer practice and every homework assignment. And then I'll say to them sort of like, do you understand what your child loves to do online? Do you know what games they're playing? And they'll look at me like I'm like stone-faced. Maybe some of them have limits and kind of know, but they have no idea what their kids really enjoy doing online or how they're even spending their time really. And that's a challenge that I want to say to you. It doesn't matter how old your kids are, whether they're like 6 or they're 26. If you should go home tonight or tomorrow and ask them what they do. What's their favorite game? What's their favorite social media site, if that's appropriate, and understand their landscape. And that's what I want you to learn about. So basically, 95% of teenagers are on social media platforms at this point. It's pervasive. So we got to deal with it. 46% of teens will say that they're on social media almost constantly, which is crazy. The highest usage of social media is YouTube, but that is not the most favorite. That's not the favorite one. That's the one that people spend the most amount of time on. The favorite one is TikTok, and yes, TikTok is a disaster. And I would delay it as long as possible. But when your kids are on TikTok, try to understand what they like about it. Try to co-engage with them. One of the biggest trends that's just worth mentioning is the shift that's happened, and I know this affects a lot of you all out there, is that COVID really did speed this up and worked this a bit. Since COVID, we really do see an increased reliance for social connection. Pre-COVID, kids were saying much more that they preferred real life interaction versus online interaction. And unfortunately, since 2021, that's kind of shifted. So that is something that I'm concerned about. So again, thinking about how much kids are using these online for social connection. And then finally, again, the risks are real. Again, the risks, everyone knows the risks, but they're actually much more nuanced than they're often presented. I think we do little tidbits and present a lot online, and they're really quite nuanced. And so I'm hoping that we're trying to get through some of the nuance. So again, YouTube tops the charts for 13 to 17-year-olds. I also just want to point out that often when I ask parents if their kids are on, especially younger kids, are on social media, they'll often say, no, my sixth grader's not on it. She doesn't have Snapchat. She doesn't have TikTok. And that's without realizing that YouTube is a social media platform. And I do think there is YouTube for Kids, which of course is where you want your kids to be. And of course, you're going to sort of try and curate it. But as we all know, it's just, it's quite easy to get onto real YouTube, and we know the algorithms are complicated. So it's just important to understand the landscape. YouTube is number one, and then TikTok, and then Snapchat and Instagram. And as I said, I've been doing this for like 15 years, and every year or 2 years, I have to change these icons around. They're always the same ones, but we've kind of switched them around now. And so we need to be paying attention to YouTube, and I'm not sure we're always paying attention enough to it. Okay, here's my quick talk about social media. Now I would like to move on to understanding AI. And again, this is really mostly meant to talk about the social and emotional piece and to begin the discussion on parenting around AI. In terms of what you need to know about AI, in terms of parenting, the things that I think are important to understand is what traditional AI is versus generative. It's generative AI that we're really talking about, the Chat GPT. that's coming up with sort of new ideas, not just like, not just your Spotify playlist, which would be like traditional. I do want to say that chat, you all know this, but the generative AI can be very good for boosting learning and cultivating creativity. And I am very happy that there is a huge now dialogue in schools on how we're going to use this as a tool while also making sure that kids are learning to problem solve and write and do math problems. I want to put a shout out for one thing about the study mode on ChatGPT. If you don't know about the study mode, ask your kids about it, explore it. It is a way to help use chat that's more of a tutorial where it's not giving you the answers. It's sort of like prompt. It's kind of like a tutor. It's kind of like prompting you through. And I actually think it's probably a better way for middle schoolers, high schoolers, and maybe even college kids to be using ChatGPT in terms of school. Okay, that's what I want to say about the sort of academic piece of ChatGPT, but I really want to spend more time thinking about the social part of it. And I want to talk about social AI companions, specifically Snapchat, but there's a whole bunch of other ones. If you don't know what I'm talking about, ask your kids because they will explain it to you, and about chatbots. So I've been doing a lot of thinking and trying to understand the research. Again, this is the one area that there isn't as much research on because it's just coming out. So again, we're definitely the guinea pigs. 10 years ago, I said that the kids were really guinea pigs in terms of understanding like any bit of social media. Now I would say that the kids in school today are guinea pigs for sort of understanding the role of AI. I do think, but it's so interesting. Things change and then they stay the same. The parenting around AI is the same as the parenting. So do not get overwhelmed with it. It's the same parenting that you're doing in every other way. You need to get on ChatGPT or whatever AI you're using with your children. Have your children teach you about it. They, again, are fluent, whereas I don't know about you all, but I'm not so fluent. And they understand it and are much less afraid of it and are able to use it. Maybe for bad, but also for good. So you need to be on it with them. You need to understand how they talk to it, how they use it. And also, by being involved in that conversation, you can also point out when you think they may be using it poorly. So that's how I believe that we're going to parent around AI. But I also really want to talk about social and emotional support because that's the part that's making me a little bit crazy. So AI is overwhelmingly agreeable. It is programmed that way, is not neutral. And I think if you could get one thing across to your kids is that it's not by any means objective. It really does, and it's not empathetic. So what looks like empathy, with humans, we understand empathy to be life experience, context, love, all those kinds of things. What it is for AI is really they're looking at the language pattern. So AI is recognizing specific language patterns and responding in a certain way. That's what's happening. It's not actually empathy. And all the 52% of kids use AI for companionship regularly. I personally think that number's low, because I've just started asking every kid I know and trying to see what research there is out there. And it seems like everybody has tried using AI for companionship or for advice. And that's what I want to talk about. I don't want your kids really asking for advice. I don't really care if they're getting help on a math problem. That actually is not a bad use of it. What I'm worried about is the advice piece. And I'm also worried about the social companion piece. The reasons I'm really worried about that is because I think it, and then there's a good New York Times article out on this in the last couple of weeks that actually explains it much better than I do, but that talks about sort of impairing social skills and what I would term it in psychiatry distress tolerance. So in real human relationships, you piss people off, you make a mistake, there's consequences, you lose friends, you don't get invited to things, and it actually is really hard to tolerate. And that's part of human relationships. It makes relationships stronger and it helps us to develop social skills and tolerate the distress that is inherent in our relationships. But you don't get any of that on AI. AI is agreeable. They're not challenge. It's not challenge. It's not designed to be challenging, and it's not empathetic. And the other piece is that it doesn't. I know it feels like to teenagers and young adults that it's like a friend, but it doesn't. It doesn't challenge you, and you're not learning social skills. So I do think that there's a role in support. I like that AI can be validating, and some kids really need the validation. But this is the conversation. I don't have an exact answer for this. I don't think anyone does. What I know as a parent is that you need to be having these conversations and ask your kids if they're asking AI for advice and if they're using it for companionship. If they say yes, which most of the kids out there will say yes, then ask them to show you, to actually explain it to you, to understand what they're getting from it. And then you can actually challenge them or not and have real meaningful conversations about this. Okay. So, moving on from AI, the other piece of the landscape that I do want to spend some time talking about today is digital addictions. And what do I want to say about this to start with? Most people are not addicted in the psychiatric psychological definition. Most people are not addicted to their social media or to their gaming. Okay, just to be clear, we really misuse that term in terms of in this realm. Many kids are dependent on it, and it is certainly problematic. But in terms of the term addiction, I want to be really careful about that. Do I think that a lot of kids and adults are using it in a problematic way and dependent on it? Yes, but I want to be clear about the difference between addiction and dependency a little bit. So I want to talk a little bit about the red flags for when to worry. Right now, the medical and psychiatric community are really sorting through all of the diagnostic criteria. So really, it's not, I could spend 2 hours going through the history of the International World Health Organization and the DSM, which is the psychiatric organizations that research and actually label disorders. It's not, I don't think that's the best use of our time. Today, what I really want to think about is when to worry about your kids, and when not to worry, because some of your kids are using it in a problematic way, but they're not addicted to it. I do think that if you're worried about your kids in general, and you're worried about addiction, then again, you want to be really vigilant. But I want to kind of talk about this a bit. So I've divided up the red flags into three parts. The first one is behavioral. So this is when you need to worry. So when we talk about digital addictions, we often talk about problematic use of the internet and social media, and then we talk about gaming disorders. So they are similar, but they're slightly different. And there is a gender, not a full gender divide, but a pretty significant gender divide. We're talking about boys and gaming addictions, but of course, boys and girls can both have it. And with social media, it tends to be more predominantly girls, but of course, not exclusively. So when we worry is when there's a loss of control, when there's a preoccupation or a craving, when there's withdrawal symptoms, and you can see them. You see it more, in all honesty, I see it more with the gaming disorders, where you actually can see a true withdrawal symptoms when the kids are off of it. You're looking for a declining school quality of schoolwork. This is something the kids will bring up a lot. I'm doing fine in school. Why are my parents bothering me? So it's one thing. If you're noticing a decline in school, that's a red flag. And it's not just a red flag. All of these things are red flags for digital addictions, but they're also generally red flags for your kids' mental health. And often digital addictions are a symptom of broader mental health. So this is when I want you to worry in general. Sleep, in terms of behavioral stuff, there is sleep disruption. Again, there's a lot of research on how much the devices disrupt sleep. They clearly displace sleep. We all know that. And if the phones are in the bedroom, they even do that more. But they definitely just displace it and certainly disrupt it to some degree. If you see a change in your child's ADLs, that's the medical term for activities of daily living. So that's like if your child's all of a sudden not showering, not brushing their teeth, doesn't care about doing regular chores that they normally would do, that would be a red flag about broader mental health issues and possibly about some kind of digital addiction. And then again, the loss of interest in offline hobbies, because the idea is that it's okay to be online and have hobbies and interests online, but they shouldn't really take the place of the things that you love to do offline. So these are the behavioral red flags. There's also emotional and cognitive red flags. Going through lots of red flags. I want to point one of these. I'm not worried about one. I'm really worried about, well, depending on what it is. I'm more worried about any constellation of symptoms. So I start to worry about how, and this is something you can ask your kids, like you should be asking them, are they using their devices, social media or gaming, to escape loneliness? Are they using it to escape stress? Do they feel worse after scrolling or playing? I mean, one of our goals here is to teach regulation. Like part of growing up is learning how to regulate yourself, and that includes online. So that means understanding when doom scrolling or playing games is making you actually feel worse, and you need to get off of it. If it's making you feel worse, you need to take a break. Ideally, your parents aren't taking it away from you, especially if you're a teenager. You're actually choosing to take a break. So excessive FOMO and envy and appearance dissatisfaction are obviously red flags. And I understand that to some degree, social media does that for a lot of people. And again, a mild amount of FOMO or envy is actually part of life. We actually had FOMO and envy before social media. But obviously it's magnified on social media. So it's about an excessive, really, if social media is making you feel terrible about yourself. Again, irritability or anger when interrupted. I do know most parents out there are going to tell me that everybody gets, angry and when someone pulls the phone away. Again, part of the parenting process is, yeah, if you pull the phone out of their hands, they're going to be irritable. But when you're reasonably setting warnings and reminders and telling them it's time to go to bed, they're getting angry or irritable. And again, other things, and this is again, maybe more social media than gaming, when self-esteem is increasingly tied to online feedback, and that's the classic, likes and hearts and followers, and that your whole self-confidence. I mean, it's true that sometimes social media can build people's self-confidence. That's great, I guess. But when your whole sense of self is linked to the feedback you're getting online from possibly strangers, that's problematic. And then again, any problems that you're seeing offline can be triggers that there is a problematic use of the devices or the gaming. So a decrease in attention, um, in school where they were attending before and now they're distracted. Sometimes that's because they're having intrusive thoughts about gaming, or sometimes that's because they're not sleeping. But again, we want you paying attention to your kids, and if you're seeing changes of any sort, yes, you can think about digital addictions. You might also be thinking about general mental health like concerns. Basically, at this point, it's a red flag, and you just need to sort out what's going on. Um, so in terms of social and family kind of red flags, um, there is a place for online relationships, as we know, and for certain isolated, alienated kids, kids with special needs, kids that are sick. Actually, these online relationships are just life-saving and life transformative. So there is a place to connect online, and even to find communities and support online. We all know that's true. And if you've got that kind of child, I want them online connecting. But I really want people, I never want the kids online when they have an opportunity to be offline. So that's a big issue. If they're preferring their online friends to their offline friends, it doesn't mean they have a gaming addiction, but it does mean that you need to get more information, that it's time to sit them down, it's time to potentially get help. These are the red flags to sort of when you need to sort of have these conversations. Conflict with parents or partners over screen time. That's kind of like the typical addiction issue when like people have asked you to cut down or quit, and it's starting to cause problems in your relationships. Again, I know people don't want to get off their devices, but it shouldn't cause so much conflict that it is hurting their relationships in your life. At that point, I consider that a red flag. And just like any type of addiction, secretive or deceptive use. Again, lots of kids are lying. I'm not really talking about lying to your parents about being on TikTok when they don't want you to be. That's a problem, but that's a different problem. I'm talking about like lying about how much you're on or running to the bathroom so that no one sees you on it. Again, it's more sort of like in the addiction framework, is that when you're secretive or deceptive about your usage, you just have to think about it. Again, none of these things in particular mean that you have an addiction to a device. They're all red flags that require more discussion about your relationship with technology or perhaps something else. So there is a term called problematic use of the internet. That's one of the terms that goes around about complicated or dependent relationships on social media. The main components of that, again, some of this is debate, is open for debate. But the main tenets of that are obsessional thinking, lack of control, negative consequences, bad things are happening because you're on the internet, you're preoccupied with it, and that you're losing time, that you mean to be on it for 30 minutes and you lose 6 hours, and that there's withdrawal. And withdrawal can take different forms. It can be the classic withdrawal where you literally have, which we do see with gaming, where you literally have like an increased heart rate and like flu-like symptoms and things like that. It can also be just a really like a preoccupation and intrusive thoughts. So again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the actual criteria because I don't think it's all that important, but these are the general ways. And then the internet gaming disorder, which is sort of in the research. It's in some countries they're using it. In the U.S., it's still in the sort of research component. But just for your own information, and again, this could change. But for your own information, this is the criteria that we have for internet gaming disorder. Again, it's kind of similar: preoccupation with the gaming, withdrawal from the gaming, tolerance, meaning that like you need to be on the game longer to sort of enjoy it than you used to be on it, an inability to quit even when you really need to quit, giving up other activities, continuing despite problems, deceiving people, gaming to relieve negative mood like anxiety or depression, and risk losing jobs and relationships. And according to this research kind of criteria, you're supposed to have 5 or more of these symptoms within a year. I'm just throwing this out here just so that you all can see it. But it's not, I think these criteria will change and evolve over time. It's more about thinking about when you're worried about your kids. And honestly, whenever any of these symptoms come up, yes, I care about the gaming and getting them off of it, but I'm also thinking more broadly about their mental health, because often they are self-medicating in some way. So remember that if you're worried about the gaming piece and social media piece, it can be a symptom of something bigger. And at that point, it's just really about having these conversations. And if the conversations are too hard for you to have, trying to, get your child the help that they need. So let me go on from that. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to mention about that it said that it's beyond the scope of today, but I want to just throw out there. The thing that I am most concerned about actually at this moment in terms of gaming issues is the increased prevalence in the last year or two of those online gambling sites. The kid like what am I forgetting the names of them? I'm blanking on the names of them, but the online gaming, I'm really concerned about that because they're so prevalent in kids and high schooler kids and young college kids are really on them and losing a lot of money, particularly boys. There's a difference between betting $20 in the Super Bowl or being at a poker game with your friends where you're losing $5 or $10 and doing this online gambling. And it is like gambling. And I have been seeing a huge uptick. Again, I can't talk about the research because this is just really something that I've seen in my own practice in the last year or 2 years, and it's just something I'm concerned about. So if your children are doing this online gambling, I just want you to make sure you know what they're doing and that you're having conversations with them about it. Um, okay. Now I would like to spend a little bit of time looking to see how much time I have, like 10 minutes. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about the plan because we've kind of talked about your relationship with technology, talked about your parenting style, talked about the digital landscape, and now I really want to talk about your plan. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you what age your child should get TikTok and when your child should get a phone and all of those things. There's a gazillion things out there, and they're all inconsistent. Um, and they're actually missing the point. What you need to do is think about what are your big goals because your kids are eventually going to have a phone. And to be honest with you, it used to be when I did these talks, everybody wanted me to tell them what age the child could get a phone. And truthfully, the phone thing doesn't even matter anymore because your child has a smartwatch or they have an iPad or they have a computer. So again, it's become much more fluid. What's really important is what are your parenting goals as you make the plan? These are the things that I think, and for myself and my patients and my research, these are the things that I think are most important as you're thinking about limits and plans. And that is thinking about how to cultivate digital citizenship from a really young age, thinking about how to cultivate online resilience, thinking about how to cultivate a strong identity development, positive sense of self online, and then helping your kids develop really good skills around self-regulation because that's what it's all about. So to me, that's what we care about. I don't care about the hour on, the hour off, what time they should do it, because again, that's very individual to every family and really individual to every child, and also should be very developmental. I don't know if I've mentioned that yet, but as a pediatric psychiatrist, I feel very strongly that we think about all of this developmentally. What's appropriate for your 17-year-old isn't necessarily even appropriate for your 15-year-old. You need to understand where your children are developmentally. If they've got something like ADHD, you're taking a year or 2 years off of their biological age when you're thinking developmentally. And so this is very fluid. Whatever plan you make today is going to evolve because it has to, because your kids are growing. Okay. So I'm really into citizenship. So how do you do it as a parent, right? You're doing it offline, so you should be doing it online. So how do you cultivate kindness or citizenship online? These are some of my ideas. I'm sure we could add to this list. But the things I say to kids are delete embarrassing photos. If you have an embarrassing photo of somebody, someone sends it to you, you should delete it. When people snap you or text you, you should always respond. It's a big thing that kids do where they just ghost them and they don't respond. It's really mean. And we're trying to teach our kids, whether they're 6 or 16, to be kind. So if your kids are getting snaps and texts, even if you don't have time, just any kind of response is kind. Sending kudos in texts and snaps, I think is really nice. We're always being negative. So if one of your friends wins something or does something really nice, encouraging like a snap or a text or something that's encouraging. Standing up for friends who are being bullied. It's very easy to be a bystander and not an upstander with cyberbullying. So teaching your kids from a very young age to stand up, not just like sit on that group chat and not say anything, figure out how to stand up. And also helping your kids get out of negative group chats or negative private stories or whatever it is that they're on that's negative, helping them understand when they need to get off. The things we don't want kids doing are making critical comments, posting pictures. This is my big deal for teenagers. Posting pictures when not everyone's invited. If you have a birthday dinner and you've invited every person that would ever want to be invited, great, post away. But if you're having a small party or a small dinner and you've invited 5 people, but you know there's 5 or 10 people that would like to be invited, don't post or post 3 days later. It's really hard to not be invited to things and know about it in real time. For those of us who grew up pre like hardcore social media, we didn't have to deal with that. We found out way later. We didn't find out in real time. Don't take screenshots of Snapchats. We get into lots of trouble with that. Don't forward mean or embarrassing posts. Don't ask people to send you sexy photos, and don't pretend to be someone that you're not. And I don't mean that in a fraud sense. So yeah, of course you should not commit fraud, but I also mean trying to be your authentic self. Trying to pretend like you're something that you're not online is not great. Our goal is to, if you're going to present yourself online, it's to be your authentic self. So how do we promote online resilience? Again, I could spend an hour on this in 25 slides. So these are just a couple of my thoughts through the years of thinking about, skinning. I have found that parents are more scared about letting their kids skin their knee online than they are offline. We're all okay with falling off the bike and realizing losing the game and realizing that's part of life. We're less okay with like letting our kids make little mistakes online. The earlier they're online to some degree, the more you can be online with them and help them when they make mistakes. So again, ways to promote resilience is really playing games and shows with your kids when they're young, really talking about the fantasy from reality. This is, again, that's an old bullet that I had from years ago that I put back on with AI, because I think with all these deep fakes and things like that, helping your kids understand fantasy from reality is really important. And it's a very big issue. We really didn't get into body image today, but in terms of cultivating resilience, in terms of body image online, really talking about fantasy and reality. You should never talk about beauty in terms of how people look on social media, because it's not real. If you're going to talk about beauty about the people in your life. Try to understand that what you see online isn't real. Challenge stereotypes, talk about empathy online. This is about when you are watching things with your kids and a character is being empathetic or not, pointing it out. It's all about the discussions. Thinking about credibility and authenticity. Hopefully your kids are doing that in school to some degree, but you also should be helping them understand that. If they're on social media, you should be following them. If there's some reason that you don't want to follow them, then they need the cool cousin or the cool aunt following them. Somebody you trust should be following them and pointing out if they see problems with their social media profile. Let them turn small mistakes into teachable moments. Don't shut it down. They make a mistake. Don't take everything away or take it away for a day, because what you need them to do is to learn, because they're going to make a lot of mistakes. And it's kind of better if they make it under your watch versus hiding it from you. Another thing that I think is important is apologizing to people in person for online mistakes or even offline mistakes. A lot of the mistakes I see interpersonally in middle school and high school and college are because something happens online or offline, and then people send each other like little texts or snaps about it. And that's just not helpful. You lose the nuance. If you did something that you need to apologize for, FaceTime, do it in person. Pick up the old school phone in theory, or FaceTime them and talk to someone face to face. Most problems get worked out much easier face to face, but I think kids and adults are doing less and less of this. And at the end of the day, try to keep the communication open, because again, as long as you're talking to your kids, it's going to be okay. At the end of the day, your kids need to know your values around friendship, technology in general, and sexuality and beauty. Because if you're not talking to them about it, they're getting all of their information online. They're getting it from influencers. They're getting it from Reddit. They're getting it from places that I don't really want your kids to get information from. I want them to learn whatever your value system is around this stuff. I want them to understand what real friendship is. I want them to understand what you think about beauty or sexuality, or what you're thinking about social media or technology. Again, it's never been more important for you to be having these actual conversations with your kids so that they're internalizing your value system and they're not being raised online. So, in conclusion, I have the Cyber Bill of Rights that I keep on trying to update, but as sort of some take-home points about parenting and raising your kids online. Try to create tech-free family times. Meals are great. Traveling is great. Whenever you're going to be on your phones, it's not about never being on your phones. It's about just creating some family time. Try to use it as a tool, technology. Remind yourself and your kids that your digital footprint begins at birth. I do think that kids, maybe more than people like my age, have huge digital footprints. So you can skin your knee online and get away with it sometimes. But you do need to be thoughtful, again, there's about what you're putting out online. Eventually, your kids have to regulate their own screen time. So your job is to help them develop the tools to do that. You want them to be an upstander. You don't want technology in the bedroom. You want them getting permission. I know some of like the screen time require that your kids get permission, but they can work around that, by the way. So we want them to talk about what they're downloading, and we really just want them to be kind online. We don't want them to sleep with their phone or eat with their phone or share passwords or private information. Nothing is we don't want them to forget nothing is deleted. So you really want to be thoughtful and pause and think before you post. And you want to create a digital identity that reflects your true and authentic identity. So, with that, I know I spoke quickly and I covered a lot. You can find out, you can go to my website or follow me on Instagram and, and ask further questions. But I think I did this okay. I think we have like 10 minutes or so to answer questions or have a discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Gold. So yeah, we'll transition here into the question and answer portion of the talk. So everyone feel free to place a question in the chat, and then Dr. McAfee and I will facilitate this portion here for you, Dr. Gold.
Great. Thank you so much. That was awesome. Okay, so we have a question about how do parents differentiate between overuse and addiction?
Good question.
And I guess how do we determine remediation or response to each pattern?
So that's a great question. So I think that in medicine and in psychiatry and psychology in particular, we use sort of like an impairment model. So it, it's not a perfect model with digital addictions, but it's a helpful model. The question is how impairing is their usage? Because if they're continuing to use, but yet they're seeing lots of friends offline and they're doing their chores and they're doing well in school and they're going to soccer practice or whatever, then I might argue that they might be overusing it, but it's not impairing their functioning. At the point that their usage, whatever that is, gaming, social media, whatever, at the point that it's impairing their life, like whether it's their grades, their personality, their friendships. At the point that it's impairing their life, I get more. We move more into the sort of like dependence box, if that makes sense. And then in terms of remediation, it's a fantastic question that no one has a perfect answer for. Again, you need to understand who your child is because often I find that, I mean, it could just be bad, like a bad habit that we need to fix. Often overuse, really overuse, is a symptom of something else. That's why I was saying that yes, there's these dependencies which are real, most of the time, though, I'm more worried about something else that's going on. So the first thing I would do, instead of like getting angry and shutting things down, is that I would try to open the conversation. Are you being bullied at school? Are you having problems with friends at school? Are you struggling in some way? Are you feeling sad? Are you using substances that I don't know about? Like all of it. I think this is an opportunity. If you're worried and it's impairing your child's functioning, the first thing you want to do is understand what this is really about. It's more likely a symptom of something greater. And then the next piece is trying to set, which is the gazillion dollar question, how to set limits. Again, the limits need to be depending on it really depends on the age of your child. And the older kids need to have some agency. But it may be that if it's impairing their life, that you do have to move in and set limits for them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that.
Thank you for that framework.
So another one would be if you perhaps can you speak to the discrepancy with the suggestions for resiliency online and for children, specifically in terms of posting images where they might not be included and tolerating that um, not being invited in real time, and how does that, what's the discrepancy between that and the resilience?
Oh, that's a good point. Yes. Okay. I think in general, that's a yes. No one's ever asked that question. I like that. Okay.
Mhm.
Yes. So the goal is to teach kindness to our kids. The goal is not to teach our kids how to help other kids have resiliency, right? That happens naturally. So the kind thing to do is to think about what you're posting. So I want my kids to be kind. You want your kids to be kind. So kindness means thinking about the impact of your posting on other people. So we do want to teach them how to be kind. Um, having said that, there's lots of places to build resilience online, right? I mean, it's this, I mean, the truth, like, it's upsetting when you look online and your friends, like the Snap Map. I don't know what to make of the Snap Map. Like, Snap Map, if you're not familiar, is where all of your friends, where all your friends are at the same time, which I guess some people think is good for like danger stuff. I think it's kind of really upsetting because you kind of know all your friends are in one place and you're not there. So one could argue that that's life, that everyone's always like, when I was a kid, I didn't get invited to stuff and it's part of life. But I'd like to make that distinction to the parents out there. Um, when I was growing up, and even when you all are much younger were growing up, if you were left out of something, it sucked and you built resilience, but it wasn't kind of put in your face the same way. Does that make sense? Like you went to school the next day and someone made a private joke and you're like, oh, shoot, I wasn't invited to this. And it hurt. And yes, I guess it built resiliency. Now what happens is that it's in real time. So you're at home having a perfectly nice dinner with your parents. Everything's fine. You pick up your phone and you see that your four best friends are out to dinner with each other and you're not included. There's a little, I mean, that's a little bit more stark than my like private joke 3 days later at school. So I do think it's a lot harder to manage now than it was pre-technology. I do, part of growing up is learning to manage it. I agree. So when when this does happen to your child, I would frame it in resilience, like this is part of life and learning to tolerate it as part of life. But it also is a lesson not to do it to other kids,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, so, I mean, I think that they both make sense.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, maybe we'll go with, so there are a lot of questions coming in through the chat. When does this start? Is it still the most prevalent with teens? So I guess like which age group are you seeing problematic screen use in? When does it start?
I mean, it's hard to, I mean, more in high school. I mean, again, so more in high school, because once you hit, um, more in seventh and starting in seventh and eighth grade and beyond, it's really when kids have independence. Prior to a certain age, the parents really are controlling it. Whether you're doing a good job or not doing a good job controlling it, you're sort of in charge. There is a point of where, the reality, like parent use leads to kids use. That's true up until age 12 or 13. Around age 12 or 13, in the research, that becomes unhinged.
Mm.
So a 13-year-old has their own relationship with technology. I would argue that pre-12, the relationship to technology is often connected to sort of what's going on at home. I would say 13-ish plus, again, developmentally, this is appropriate. Kids begin to have their own relationship with technology, whether the parents like it or not. That's the age where if the parents have restricted all social media, the kids are pretending or hiding it. That's the way, that's the where the kids are screaming and yelling at their parents. So I would say around that 12, 13 age is when parents feel like they lose control. I used to give these talks all the time in person. And what I found is that when I spoke to elementary school parents, it was like a crowded room. When I spoke to middle school parents, it was like some empty seats. And then when I spoke to high school parents, like barely anyone showed up. And I think that spoke to the fact that the parents had sort of given up, if that makes sense, by the time they got to high school. So I do think the sweet spot is middle school, but I don't think you should give up in high school. There's just so much to talk about in high school.
There's hope in high school.
There's definitely hope because these conversations are big and you can spend a lot of time with your kids. I mean, at this moment, I'm trying to get my kids to teach me AI because it allows us to be online together. They're really good at it. I understand what they get out of it. And the whole interactive process is we're all growing from it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Along those lines, one question relates to a 15-year-old, for example, or someone in high school, maybe has already developed some bad habits related to online or internet use. Developmentally, how appropriately do you step in as a parent? Perhaps you know about some feelings of loneliness, fewer hobbies, and turning to the phone in place of offline engagements.
So in those cases, I want there's some really great research. It's older, but it's great research on boys and gaming. So it's not true for girls. This is a gender thing. There's this research around this idea that when boys are gaming, and especially if they're using Discord, so in Discord they can actually talk to other kids, that it decreases inhibition because they're playing, and all of a sudden they'll start talking to each other. And if you have middle school boys or high school boys, they don't really talk to each other in general as much as maybe girls do. Something about the gaming facilitates this like teamwork and they're talking to each other and there's actually a real sense of connection and sometimes there's a sense of an ability to share even what's going on and like at home or at school in these conversations. I know we're all worried about how violent they are and all that. I understand all that, but there is a role for like sort of social connection. So if you've got a teenage boy that's already has problematic use and you're also worried about them just generally being isolated, I think that the worst thing you can do is come in and shut it all down. For all you know, you're taking away the support system that he has. What I think you want to do is figure out how do you like maybe a little bit of gaming is good for him, but maybe he needs your help in going to bed, like getting off the game. So I think this is where you really need to get a sense of what he needs because for some kids, like the gaming can be really wonderful. The problem is how to shut it down, of course.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And maybe in the last 1 minute, what are the top 3 red flags that you think parents or family members should be watching for?
Any change in behavior. So any change is what you're looking for. I think most of the things on my long lists were really about changes. So anything that your child was one way and has now changed in another way that other people are noticing, anything secretive is a problem. If you walk in the room and they're shutting their laptop, if they're not talking to people they used to talk to, I just get worried about that in general. So I would say any change in behavior, any secretive behavior. Yeah, that's really it. Because I would say that the change of behavior could be anything. It could be like school change in behavior, eating change in behavior. But you should be paying. And the other thing as parents is you have to trust your gut. Like I think we all second guess ourselves as parents. It's so easy. If you're thinking your child's being secretive and you think there's a change in their behavior, you need to be on it. You need to be getting. If you can't get the answers, you need to get help. But you have to know what's going on, and they have to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
So
Perfect.
just keep on talking, make up stuff, find reasons to talk to them about this stuff.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Top 2 red flags instead of 3, even better, more concise.
Yeah, well, one is kind of a big one.
Yeah. Thank
Maintain
you
that
so much,
connection.
Dr. Gold, and thank you to everyone for your engagement and for coming tonight. We hope to see you at the next webinar.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Dr. Gold.
Thank you. Bye.